Light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. Someone recently asked me if there would ever be an episode in which Sister Who would be unmasked, so to speak. I suppose it was an expression of curiosity about the man behind Sister Who, or the man within Sister Who. It's not that I try to be someone different when I'm in ritual garb. Some people say I'm completely different, some people say I'm no different. I know there are certain aspects of the costume that are actually autism coping mechanisms, such that my autism becomes much less pronounced when I'm in ritual garb as Sister Who than when I'm not. I guess the point that stands out to me the most is just that there are all these symbols of what's inside of me that through Sister Who are brought out and illustrated with symbols and face paint and costuming so that they can be shared. Being Sister Who is a spiritual work because it exists specifically to nurture others' personal and spiritual growth, but it is also clearly an artistic work, a theatrical and creative work. Something about the colors and the materials, the fabrics, the movement, everything that comes together to form this complex external persona that in some ways is a window onto all sorts of spiritual truths and reality. There's something about every creative work, though, that longs to be shared, not in order to be validated, but in a way that recognizes that beauty is a verb. It's a dynamic. It's a bond and a bridge between people. And a bridge serves no purpose if nobody crosses it. It's not that it needs to be validated by people walking back and forth across it for no reason, but rather that it exists to serve connections between people. And when people don't cross the bridge, when they don't make those connections, I suppose there's a sense in which you could imagine that the bridge feels somehow like it hasn't served its life purpose, like it maybe even a sense of failure. And yet it's not that the bridge has failed, it's that the people have failed to utilize the bridge. And in so many cases throughout the centuries, it's not that the artist failed, it's that the people failed to utilize the artist to serve their communities' growth and renewal. Things may look beautiful or feel comfortable at a particular point in time, and someone may remark, I wish it could always be like this. But when we think about that statement, it becomes very problematic, because to say, I wish it could always be like this is almost, in truth, suicidal in nature, because to remain within a single moment is essentially suicide. Life by its very nature is growing and development and moving and changing. And for everything to be held in one position is like strangling it. And all the life goes out of it, and it has no movement, it has no growth, it has no development. And even at that, it still won't stay exactly as it is, because decay will set in. Change is impossible to avoid. It's not that we shouldn't say, I wish every moment could be like this, and really notice the beauty and the joy of that moment. But part of being human is learning to integrate with the reality that we are creatures of time, and that everything is passing. And as fast as a beautiful moment occurs, it fades into the past. And we try to remember it, and we try to create things that will allow the energy and the spirit and the feeling of that moment to live beyond that moment, so that it can minister, if you will, to people in future times. I think that's very good, and it should be encouraged, and it should be done. But not at the expense of remembering that we are creatures of time, that nothing is forever, that we can hang a painting in a museum and have it make the room climate controlled and protected in such a way as to create the maximum longevity. And even at that, there is a certain point at which material things do not have the ability to be eternal. There's a certain unavoidable deterioration that happens even to the most stable materials. Even plastic will eventually break down, especially in sunlight. It doesn't last forever. It lasts a very, very long time, but it doesn't last forever. In a similar sort of way, I'm here as Sister Who, offering what I can, and in the larger perspective, I suppose one could say that I'm really nothing. I'm just an individual with a bit of creativity and an unusual costume, a bit of face paint, doing whatever good I can within the limits of my wisdom and knowledge and understanding. There's a lot of things I don't understand, a lot of things I'm still learning, and of course that's what makes life fascinating and what gives me new material for these shows all the time. But there are times when I wish I could express all these things more eloquently and in a more refined, polished, even professorial manner, to where someone would say, yes, he was, in terms of his technique, he was a genuinely good speaker. And I don't know that I am a genuinely good speaker in terms of technique, but I find a curious sort of discovery frequently within speaking whatever comes into my mind, that sometimes the most amazing insights come out that I myself didn't even know before. Insights about particular situations, sometimes about other people, synchronicities that I couldn't have created if I tried, because I couldn't possibly have had the information to know, to be ready for that moment. I remember when I attempted to climb Mount Columbia in Colorado, and I had my service dog with me, and we got all the way to tree line, and there was so much fog and dense clouds around the summit that the top of the mountain couldn't even be seen. And because when you get to tree line and above that it's all rocky and there wasn't really a trail to follow, I would have to see where the summit was in order to be heading toward it. So with the whole summit shrouded in dense fog, we could have sat there all day waiting for the fog to lift, I suppose. Didn't seem like it was going to, there was no wind, so it wasn't going to be changing anytime soon as far as I could tell. So even though this was my second attempt, it was so discouraging, I decided that there wasn't any way to complete it on that particular day. I would have to come back when the weather was more cooperative. So we turned around and headed back down, Bedivere and I. And I was discouraged, I was grumpy, I had tried twice, I had gotten up in the middle of the night to do my face paint and get into ritual garb and get myself to the mountain, and had gone through all this extensive preparation and made such an effort, and it didn't work out, and I was grumpy and disappointed, and Bedivere was so sensitive to every smell of the animals in the woods that he kept stopping along the trail, half expecting something to jump out at him. And I wouldn't say he wasn't comfortable in the woods, it was just such a new environment for him that he really didn't know how to respond to it. And me being grumpy, I wasn't being as patient as I should have with him, I suppose, but we're kind of making our way down. Got to a particular point, and this young man in the distance saw me and grinned. I think he was wearing a t-shirt and a cowboy hat and jeans, which made him look like a slightly unusual hiker, but and then sunglasses, and he just came right up to me and said, "Could I please have a picture?" And I was very gracious, and in spite of my grumpiness, which I tried to conceal, and just said, "Well, of course, sure, yes, thank you, and here's one of my calling cards if you want to visit my website later," and so forth. And so we took a picture, and he continued on up the trail smiling, and I didn't know if that was all there was to it or what, but then I got an email from him a short time later, and it's kind of developed into a casual ongoing friendship, and we still correspond occasionally even today. But the point of all that is that sometimes, even when I am, from my perspective, not at my best, the divine chooses to use it by creating a synchronicity I couldn't have anticipated. I never met him before. I didn't know he was even coming to go hiking there today. I didn't know what my significance would mean to him or how he would respond. But it put a smile on his face and made his hike special, and opened some new doors of communication for him, and eventually brought him to some new insights from what he told me. And I'm very glad that I could serve that moment. It was an honor to be there for him and to serve that opportunity. And I'm not telling you this to pat myself on the back, but simply to say that these sorts of unexpected synchronicities seem to happen all the time when I put on my ritual garb. And so that's where I began thinking of being Sister Who as a sort of spiritual calling. And even when I'm not at my best, even when I stumble over the words, even when I may say completely the wrong thing, somehow God still uses it. And so I find a certain duty in that, to show up for the work, to show up and to do whatever I can. And if I'm feeling grumpy, well, I'll do my best, but I'm clearly not at my best in my opinion. But God may use that anyway. And there may be other times where I feel like I am so on the mark and I am feeling good and I'm smiling and I'm saying everything right. And the response I get suggests that it means nothing. That everyone thought it was nice, but it's kind of like those landscape calendar photographs that come out every year from various businesses and insurance companies and so forth. And they're beautiful photographs, really, but they don't change me. There are some photos that grab me by the throat and make me think. But calendar photos are kind of like the music in the elevators in office buildings. It's not intended to be inspiring. It's intended to make the ride through the elevator a little more pleasant. But the minute you step off the elevator, you're expected to forget whatever music was playing in there, because it really wasn't intended to be important. There are times when I intend things to be important, and the response says that, yeah, it was nice, but it really wasn't that important. And there are other times where I feel so ill-equipped to say any correct thing, and I meet someone and they want me to tell them something marvelous, and I can't think of a single marvelous thing at the moment. And so sometimes I'll say, well, look at me and tell me which detail, which symbol within my ritual garb or my face paint, which thing you notice first. And whatever they say, I immediately go into what are the symbols of that, and trust that somehow in that synchronicity there may be something, because that's what they notice first, there may be something going on within that person that relates to that symbol in some way, and that something I say may be used to help them find their own answer to a particular question they were struggling with. I'm happy to serve that purpose, and I guess in doing these shows, it's that sort of opportunity for synchronicity. There was one time I was lining up for an annual parade, and someone came running up to me to say thank you for that wonderful show that you put on last December when I was going through a really dark time. What you said on that show meant so much to me that it really turned my life around. And I just very humbly said thank you. I'm very honored that I was able to help you without even realizing that I did. And of course, the thing that makes it all the more amazing is that the time to which he was referring, I was not in active production at that point. The shows had been created and were being rerun, and there are various times in my life where for a few months or even a few years there was no active production happening, but there were so many shows that had been created that they were being rerun in a ever larger rotation. And at this point we have nearly 400 shows that have been made. So I don't know when or how many years in the future or under what circumstances this show is going to be replayed, or who's going to hear it, who's going to see it, and how they're going to interpret it, what it's going to tell them about what's going on in his or her own life, depending on what transitions or challenges or whatever they're facing at that time. And of course it also opens the possibility that they may see the same show on multiple occasions, and each time they will learn something different from it, because each time they will, to a minimal degree, be a different person. Each time I hiked the trail to Mount Columbia, I was a different person. The first time I came with a certain set of experience, a certain set of emotions, a certain set of perceptions. When I came back for the second attempt, I tried a different route specifically because of the memory of that first attempt. And it was a different day, a different month, a different weather condition, a different dog with me. And during the first attempt, I had my Old English sheepdog Gareth with me. During the second attempt, I had my service dog Bedivere with me. And in spirit, I also had Gareth with me on the second attempt, because in between the two attempts, Gareth had died, and I was carrying his cremated ashes with me in my backpack when I made the second attempt. And if I ever do get to make a third attempt and hopefully finally reach the summit, I am intending to bring Gareth's ashes with me again, since he was with me on the first attempt. But we'll have to see whether or not or when that happens. But the point being that I'm just the servant of the work. And I think sometimes what is most important is that my lack of understanding is not the reason that I censor or limit or hold the work back. That I may wish I was better prepared for this or that or whatever occasion. Would you stand up and sing a song? Well, I'd love to, but I haven't practiced enough. Well, would you stand up and sing a song anyway? Well, I'd love to, but I haven't practiced enough. I don't want that to be me. I may say, well, I haven't practiced, but I will give it my best. Not because I'm trying to reduce the pressure on me to do exceptionally, but because I'm inviting the people to listen to the words of the song and consider the spirit of it. Because if you're looking for a perfect technique, if it's me, you're probably looking in the wrong place. I don't know if there's anything I do that perfectly. Though I did have a drag queen once compliment me by saying that she thought my makeup was flawless. And I said, well, maybe. I think at the time, actually, I just said thank you. But to me, it is never flawless because, of course, as an autistic, I see the details and I know what was frustrating during the particular makeup session that preceded the appearance. I don't know that I've ever had a single makeup session go so perfectly that there wasn't something that didn't look quite right to me. But that's because I'm looking at it almost under a microscope when I'm putting it on. That the slightest little variance or color inconsistent or out of place or whatever, and I notice it. But I've tried to accept that I don't have to be perfect in order to get up, show up, and put a smile on someone's face, put an insight into someone's perception, give someone a new perspective on something that up until that point was very overwhelming for them. If I can empower people in the living of their lives, if I can give them ways of appreciating what they have and not taking anything for granted, and not taking their opportunities for granted either, and using their resources to make the world a better place instead of to be a very small closed circle of self-serving, here I am, look at me, aren't I beautiful, thank you for your validation. what does that ever mean? If, on the other hand, there is something about being Sister Who that has inspired someone to be more aware of themselves, more aware of their emotions, more aware of the patterns in their lives, of, well, as I was telling someone on the phone this morning, if something happens once, it's an event. If it happens twice, it's teetering on the brink of becoming a habit or a pattern. If it's a good habit, fine, we'll do it again. If it's a bad habit, it's time to be a little more assertive to make sure that it doesn't happen again, because we don't want a sloppiness or tardiness or whatever the thing may be to become habitual. And to address that, it requires at least a minimum of self-discipline. I run into a lot of people over time who, in talking with Sister Who and realizing deeper meanings and symbolisms to things, even within their own lives, will sometimes make the remark that they're afraid they don't really know themselves. And I don't know to what degree that's true, but to me it's really not a problem. It's more of an event or a point in time. If you feel like you don't know yourself now, you can immediately embrace activities that will reacquaint you with yourself. You can try something creative, or if you've been doing creative things all your life, you can try something more, well, it's not that it's not creative. A lot of times creativity is perceived in terms of being the fine arts, painting, macrame, sculpture, artistic things. And engineering and mechanical stuff is perceived as not being creative, but it really has its own kind of creativity too. If you've never ever tried it before, why not take a welding class? You may never use the information again, but there may be something about learning how to weld that will change your perspective on how you deal with other challenges in life. There may be something about learning how to rebuild a engine for a car, or how to rebuild a computer, that you may have no aptitude for it. It may be very difficult to learn, but something about even embracing the challenge will take you beyond who and where and what you are now. And if we're forever expanding our definition of ourselves, we're becoming capable of more things. If, as Sister Who, for the first 3 years, the face kind of evolved through different sorts of appearances that I tried until I reached this appearance, and I looked in the mirror and just knew that this was right. And so for the basically 22 years since, the configuration of the face paint hasn't changed, with very rare exceptions. There was one time, for those who are scrutinizing all of my videos, and I don't know whether this one is on YouTube or not, but there was one time where we went into a production session and the makeup is specifically reversed so that the eye that's framed in purple is on the left, and the purple on my nose is on the right side instead of the left, and everything's exact mirror image flipped. The reason for that was because there was a very goofy, embarrassing accident in which I actually got hit in the eye with a chisel, and it started a detachment of the retina that was repaired a couple years later. But because that accident had happened only 2 days before production, when I did the makeup, I reversed the colors specifically because I thought it would be more gentle around the injured eye to just gently rub the white paint on rather than using the paintbrush to put the purple face paint around the eye. So if anybody's looking for trivia in all my shows, that's one little thing you could watch for. It's a quirk, and I don't remember which episode number that was, but it was because of that injury. But thankfully, when they reattached my retina a couple years later, as far as I know, everything was completely successful. They continue to monitor the health of the eye, though. But anyway, that's a big digression. But it was just an example of how the face has stayed the same, except, minor variances. Nothing is quite that constant. The costume, the ritual garb, as I more often call it, evolved somewhat over the first 6 to 7 years, and after that pretty much standardized into the current form. Trying to figure out what would genuinely work. There was one costume I used that had these huge angel wing sleeves, a great big triangular sleeve that reached almost to the floor. And it was so obnoxious to try to do anything in because the sleeves would get caught on everything. So I very much prefer the tight-fitted cuff because I can do more things. And I was trying to vary the height of the hem of the skirt from time to time because having to go up and down stairs, sometimes carrying things, it can be a little bit tricky if I don't have a free hand to pick up the front of the skirt so that I don't trip on it. There is a particular movement where I'm almost like I'm marching up the stairs, though, that makes it safe even if I'm carrying things to go upstairs with a full skirt on. But on a brief light note on that point, some young girl about 9 years old asked me once, "Why are you wearing a woman's dress?" And I said, "I'm not wearing a woman's dress. No woman has ever worn this dress. This is my dress." The notion of men having dresses, I guess, was a new concept for her, but everyone standing around got a good laugh out of that. Clothing is clothing. A person is a person is a person. What matters is who the person is on the inside. All that being said, just offering whatever comes into mind without censoring it and trusting that somehow it will be guided to be what that person needs. And I always tell people, if it's not helpful, let it go, just forget about it. If it is helpful, that's the part you hang on to.